You need insurance to cover you should something happen to you. And then you need food on the table. You need lights and water. Everything else after that is fun stuff. So you need to make sure that you get all those things covered. The hardest part of a budget is not being afraid of where you are. People are like, well, what if I know I get my paycheck and I don't have any money left? Well, a lot of times what you find is it's not that the paycheck isn't big enough, they just don't know where it's going. So sitting down and writing down, this is what I pay for this every month, and then put the pay in there and find out what's left, and you'll be amazed. There are situations where I've actually worked with who've ended up in the red, but making a few adjustments here and there. Some of them have changed minor things like their automobile insurance, or how much they're having put into their 401k until they can get some things in line to be able to go back and do that at 100%.
So should they review their budget from last year, or if they didn't have a budget, track their spending if they have receipts or that type of thing, and see where their money went to?
I say your checkbook is the telltale for you. I can look at your check register, or I can look at you keeping it online and tell you what you enjoy, because it'll tell on you. You could call your local water company, electric company. They can tell you what your average bill was for the year. Cable, internet, those types of things, and shop those things. People. There's so many options out there now for cable and TV and for internet services. Sometimes we don't think outside the box to say, oh, well, I could save $20 a month here doing this versus what I've always done. So, yeah, and if they've not created one, really and truly, I hear every day of my life somebody complaining about Washington overspending money. Mm-hmm. Well, how is it that we, the people, expect Washington to live by a budget when we don't even bother to take the time to do it? And it'll help guide you. I mean, it's a roadmap. It tells you how to get from point A to point B. And if you want to if you want to have $100,000 in the bank in 20 years, you need to put certain things in place to see that goal happen.
You mentioned a few money-saving tips like programmable thermostats. Talk about some of the little things that people can do to make sure that they're allocating their funds and trying to save their money.
Most people will tell you in the summertime, as long as you have your air conditioning unit set at 78 or a little above, that you'll save money over the summer. There are people I know who say, I'm not going to be in my house in 78 degrees, not in the South. Well, programmable thermostat would let you run it at one temperature while you're not at home during the day while you're at work, and then bring it down to a comfortable temperature, which is also going to affect that. Water bill. There's some energy saving appliances out there now that don't use as much water in the washing machines. Well, that's going to make a drastic effect on your water bill. A lot of the newer machines, when they spin, will have a closed dryer when you get ready to take them to the dryer than they were in a top-load machine. That's going to save you energy costs as far as electric goes, because you're not going to run the dryer as long as you have in the past. Just those kinds of things that we don't normally necessarily think about. Don't leave the front door open. My mother used to say, don't cool all the outdoors. So just minor things of just being mindful. I read a statistic, I think 52% of food bought at the grocery store ends up in the trash can.
Really?
Yeah. So that tells me that people aren't being mindful of what they're spending at the grocery store. They're putting it in the refrigerator, and they're not doing anything with it. And y'all were talking earlier about Paula Deen and her diabetes, and what studies are finding is that people are healthier when they're cooking at home and when they're eating more natural foods. So by all means, if you're going to take the time to go to the grocery store, sure, don't let it go to ruin and end up throwing it out.
Especially produce.
Yes.
Well, one of your tips is don't spend more than you make. And I was listening to Andy Stanley, and he had some good tips on he did a study called guardrails, and he said one way to, guardrails in your relationships is to talk about budgeting. And he said some people Some people spend 95% of their paycheck. Some people spend 105 of their paycheck. And he said that gets to be a problem. Maybe not now, but down the road it'll eventually be a problem. So how can you give people advice on what percentage they should keep of their paycheck and what percentage they should save? I guess it's a case-by-case basis, but generally speaking.
It is. You want to get where you're... I tell everybody, attempt to start out at 10%. That's the minimum. You need an emergency fund. Tires wear out, engines act up, bumps and bruises happen, and there's co-pays and things like that. So you need to make sure that you've got money set aside. Otherwise, you're going to be using plastic or some other form of credit to make that happen. One of the biggest success stories I can tell you is people who have it automatically withdrawn from their paycheck. My advice with that is, if you have your paycheck direct deposited to Bank A, have your savings come out and go to Bank B, because then you can't just get on the internet and transfer that money, or you can't just call the bank. You physically got to go move the money from one account to the other and put it there and leave it and be disciplined about it. You don't want to spend more than 30% of your income on housing, and you don't want to spend more than 25% of your income on an automobile or transportation. Everybody would like to drive, a shiny new car, but historically the best car is a paid-for car. It's going to be the least expensive on you.
So if they're doing that, they might want to think about selling that car if it's causing trouble.
Correct.
Now, we have talked, and I love your analogy with plastic versus actual cash. Tell the viewers about that.
That is, I wish I could say I came up with it, but I didn't. In Europe, they did a study, actually put sensors on your head and sent people out shopping. The connection between cash money and the brain is not the same reaction. It doesn't happen at all when you swipe that piece of plastic. You're not conscious of how much money you're spending. So I tell everybody, debit cards are nice and convenient, but they will get you in trouble in a heartbeat. And you need to make sure that you control. That's out of control spending if you're not being mindful of it. If you know that your budget for gasoline is $175 a month, don't spend more than that on your debit card. And if you can't do that, don't use it, because you'll get yourself in trouble. It's as bad as having a credit card in some instances, because you can overdraw your bank account. You can end up with not enough money to pay rent and things like that. So cash is always better in hand. And I know that there are people out there who say, well, I absolutely despise to go by the bank and get cash. I hate to carry it. And I get that. So I'm not anti-debit card. You just need to be mindful of what you're doing. And if you're going to go shopping, don't go shopping with a shopaholic. Go shopping with somebody who's kind of your accountability partner, that's going to say, do you have enough money set aside to do this? Is this in your budget? So that you don't get home and go, oh, I cannot believe I just spent that money on that. And it happens. Buyer's remorse is awful.
Now, we've been to one of your classes, and in your classes, you say in every relationship there is a spender and a saver. And so as people are starting out this new year, they may be thinking about ways they can pay off some debt. What advice would you give to couples out there on what they can do together?
Sit down and come to an agreement. It's funny, I think the hardest people to work with are couples, because they have very different views, and you'll get into situations where one will say, I'm just not willing to give on this. I had a couple come to me one time, and the husband said, my wife goes to the mall and spends money all the time. And I said, well, okay, why don't y'all come sit down and talk to me? And I said, bring your checkbook. Well, he was spending as much money at Bass Pro as she was spending at the mall, and he's going, don't you spend. And I'm thinking, that's a two-way street. You can't lay all the blame on her and say, well, she can't go to the mall, but you can go have your hobby too. I said, what you guys need to do is come to an agreement of, you each enjoy certain things, set a limit on what you're willing to allow of your budget to spend on those hobbies. All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. You need to budget for that. But what I see most people getting into trouble, cell phone bills and eating out. That's the two biggest things you see. I mean, and it's difficult to plan out your meals for the week and go home and cook them with the society that we live in today. But at the same time, you don't realize how much money you're actually spending swiping that card, eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner out.
It adds up, it really does.
Especially if you work downtown.
Yes.
Yes, I actually have my Central Park cup sitting over here on the floor. So Perry, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into this business.
Well, I've been doing accounting, I guess, for about 25 years, both in public and private, and I've been self-employed in the last 7 years, and we just recently created a partnership, and we have 2 other CPAs working with us in
So
our
it's
firm.
getting to be your busy time of year.
Yes, it is.
Tax time.
season. It is. I actually just got my W-2s.
I'm going to get mine tomorrow.
So, say somebody comes to you, they say, I have no idea what I'm doing. Here's all of my paperwork.
I've heard
How
some
do you-
people have brought their receipts in a plastic, and not like a
really? Like an accordion file.
no,
No,
like
a
a
Ziploc
Milo
bag.
bag, and
Oh,
like
wow.
here. Have you experienced
Garbage bags, plastic bags,
Shoe
shoe
boxes.
boxes.
everything?
Deductions or what kind of receipts are those for?
Typically.
Well, depending on what type of taxpayer, if they have their own business or their where they have receipts that they get a deduction for, we count those or we go through those. We try not to do the receipts like we used to. Like when I first started in accounting, I used to have this horrible account that would come in a garbage bag, and I would literally dump the bag in the middle of the floor and squash anything that was moving.
Oh my goodness!
Wow.
Oh my
Wow.
goodness!
Then gingerly go through this receipts, tally up the return, then give it to them, sanitize my desk and move on. But we're kind of more in an educated society where people are keeping their own books and keeping their own records. But still, people do keep them in shoe boxes. But I try to encourage them to summarize their data for us, so that they're not paying us for clerical work and they're just paying us for our tax knowledge.
Are there certain software programs out there that you would recommend?
QuickBooks is probably the most common medium out there for an average sized business. There's other softwares, but they get a little
And
bit
Quicken
more
is the
pricey.
equivalent for a personal finance.
Quicken
right?
would be like your checkbook online, or the computer.
Or Mint, if you're talking personal.
Oh, Mint.com.
Mint.com, yes.
.com.
And that will actually send you alerts when your bank account starts getting low, or if you categorize your items, it will say,
You're overspending
mine
here.
tends to say you're spending too much on crafts because I like the craft store. But
Now, you've given us a list of deductions that people may not think about. In particular, I am interested in, the student loan interest and, and energy credits. Can you talk a little bit about those things?
Yeah, the student loan interest is where, when you went to school, you got a government loan and now you're paying it back. That interest is deductible. Sometimes people miss that deduction. And then on the energy credits, they were much better in the last prior years. This year, there's still energy credits, but they're not as sweet as they were last year.